So in various other occasions, different points we will see. But this is one technique, how we can manage that. This is one technique. So we can use index to tell about that particular iterating, or we can pass the specific item and handle that item. That's what we can manage by using this. So this is another simple example of working with them. So here the counter for likes and dislikes will be independent, right? They will not affect the other buttons. They will not affect the other buttons. So that we have done by using this technique. That means this is another example. So here add a new component. So we are adding a component ng generate component, and the component is we are having a component called likes demo. Okay, skip test. Okay, and in this likes demo dot component dot ts, in the ts we are just creating a collection and a set of methods to handle, and we have likes demo dot component dot html, and here we are presenting the details. So that is one simple example of how do we deal with the iterations. Now, while working with iterations, so iteration related all properties I showed you how to deal with them. In different occasions, we will use them again and again, right? Later we will see several other examples also. Syntactically, how they work, I showed you in one example. This is iteration related options. Now here, one more important point is one of the major issue about the iterations, or not only iterations, the structural directives. So one major point about structural directives is a single HTML element, cannot handle multiple structural directives. That is one of the major issue, one of the main point you need to understand. A single HTML element cannot handle multiple structural directives. That means you can say this sentence in another way. So you cannot apply multiple structural directives, on one HTML element. You cannot apply multiple structural directives on one HTML element. So there cannot be multiple structural directives on one HTML element. That means, for example, I am writing like this. So here there is a div. I am adding ngFor, and ngFor is an iterator. While doing iteration, I want some condition also. Then I am using another ngIf, and this is invalid. That means I want condition also to handle, but you cannot directly handle both of them. So that means this structural directives, so it allow only one structural directive for on an element. You cannot use multiple structural directives on one HTML element. Then how you can manage the conditions and loops together? How we can manage the conditions and loops together? How to handle that? How we can do that? Usually to manage the conditions and loops, usually generally to manage conditions and loops. A combination, that means always we have to implement. So always implement structural components, structural components of Angular to handle multiple structural directives. So always we have to implement structural components of Angular to handle multiple structural directives. So we need to use a combination of them. And so many structural components are present. All the differences we will discuss about those structural components. And one of the important structural component is ng template. We have ng container. We have ng component. These are all structural components actually. ng template, ng container, ng component. The main purpose is, without disturbing the alignments of your document structure, it will handle adding and removing of elements. It will handle showing and hiding of elements. That means without disturbing the structure, it can manage the components in that structure. So that is what actually these structural components are. What is difference between them? We will see that. Actually, in every version, some new improvements are there. So we are using them according to the situation. So we will discuss different. Actually, what is the purpose of this? How we can manage them, how we can handle them. So let's see how we can handle and how we can manage them. Why to use them? I will tell you, we will see that. So without using them, why cannot we use again divs and spans and all, right? We will see that. Usually for that, I will take one example here. So we will design one example. I will take this data. Okay, I will copy the data. And I have some like in the assets, I have some more images. Fine. Now here I will add another component, like a new terminal. In the component, I'm generating a component. So let's say conditions. That is the component. If test is true. Okay. Let's keep this conditions component in the startup. Fine. So conditions. Okay. And that conditions, app conditions. I will keep this in the startup. Fine. So conditions is working fine. Okay. Now in this, let's go to the design of this conditions component. Okay, conditions component.ts. Let's add some data here. So we will add the data here. Fine. So I'm adding the products here. So one more category we will add for the products here. So here, instead of likes and dislikes, I'm saying just category